Welcome to Homestead Coffee Talk. Grab some coffee, tea, and let's chat a little bit today about how comparison may be holding you back. I wanted to discuss this topic today because comparison is definitely something that I know I've struggled with in a lot of different areas, and I'm thinking if it's something that has been a challenge for me, it might also be something that is a challenge for you, and you might not even realize it. When it comes to comparison, it can definitely affect us in a lot of different areas of our life. Today, I want to specifically focus in on comparison when it comes to the homesteading life and things that we're doing on the homestead and how it impacts what's going on here and how it can hold us back from moving forward towards our goals and towards reaching our dreams. Comparison is something that can easily be a challenge no matter what, but I feel like today, with as much social media as we are exposed to, it can be even more of a challenge. And while social media can be helpful for a variety of reasons, it can also get us stuck into this trap of comparison, and that can end up being something that holds us back. For some people, it might be motivating to some degree or another, but then for others, it might be something that holds you back. And so as we go through this discussion, just be thinking about where you fall on this spectrum of comparison and whether it's helpful or not helpful to you. And I want to discuss some of the issues that can come up when we are stuck in that trap of comparison. So this time of year, it is really tricky because I'll start seeing people posting on their Instagram or people putting out YouTube videos about their harvest starting to come in. And some of these people live in the same grow zone that I do, but they are not in the same climate zone. And so while we are in the same grow zone, our weather is completely different and things look completely different, and it can be really easy to get sucked into the trap of comparison and become disheartened by the lack of progress that you feel like you're making. We've had some cooler than normal weather here in the Pacific Northwest, and of course, if it's not cool, it's pouring down rain. The weather just is not great, and it hasn't been great right now, and it can make it really hard to get things done and to get things started in the garden. So because of the type of weather that we have here, oftentimes plants are getting started much later than they might be in other areas, and it can be easy to make judgments about what should be happening or how far along a person should be with different things in their garden. However, if you're not living in the exact same area, you can't really compare these two things because they're not going to be the same. It can be hard to put those two things aside and remind yourself that just because you live in the same grow zone doesn't mean it's the same exact area and doesn't mean gardening things are going to look the same. I've seen pictures of people who have had corn up to their knees at the same time that we're just starting to plant corn to start with. There are places where people are harvesting potatoes when the potatoes just recently went into the ground. Even though it's the same grow zone, they're two completely different places, and this is something that I still have to routinely remind myself about, because when you see someone else's progress and it looks like they're ready to harvest and you've just gotten started, that comparison can start to give you feelings of almost that you're not doing enough, or that you're way behind the game and you're not getting things started early enough, and your whole garden's going to be a failure because you're not starting things early enough. And that's just not true. It really has to do with the area that you live in and how things work for your area. And I can only tell you about things that work for me or things that don't work for me. And that doesn't mean that you couldn't do the exact same thing and have a different outcome and result from it. So when we're trying to gain inspiration from others who are homesteading or gardening, it's important to remember that we're all at a different place. Along with that, sometimes when it comes to thinking about the amount that can be accomplished, sometimes I have a really hard time with comparison or feelings of not doing enough, because I'll feel like I'm doing the best I can, but there's still so much more to do, and I'm not accomplishing everything that needs to be accomplished. And I have to step back and remind myself again that we're all in a different place. Some people are working full-time on their homestead, full-time on their garden, and what they're able to accomplish is going to be a little bit different than someone who is trying to work full-time and garden and homestead around work and what's happening there. And so these are just a couple of things that can start to enter in and can start to cause some of that comparison when we're seeing other people doing certain things and we're wondering why we can't get that thing done, or when we see people making more progress in an area than we are and we feel like we should be in a different position or a different place. And this can really be it can really be a challenge. And while I think that being aware of it and cognizant of it can be very helpful, I do know that it is still something that I struggle with every year and on a regular basis have to take a step back and try to put things into perspective, because it can be really hard to have those comparison thoughts. So we know that comparison can be an issue and it can really get in your head and can really affect you in that way. But what are some ways that comparison can hold us back? The first way that comparison can hold you back is that comparison can hold you back from getting started with something. Thinking back to the example about the plants that are at a different stage than mine are, it could hold you back because you might think that you shouldn't even plant a garden because yours are not at the same point and you would just be starting them now and that person's harvesting, and so what's the point? Why even bother? And that really is going to be detrimental, particularly if you are in an area where you would normally be starting things later, even though it's the same grow zone. So don't let that comparison hold you back from getting started. It could be that, you know what, this year you're not starting your plants from seed and you need to buy transplants and get them put in the ground. Oh well, if that's what needs to be done in order to continue gardening and continue moving ahead, then that's what's best for you for that year. It's okay if it's not turning out exactly the way that you had envisioned. If you are still getting plants in the ground and you're still making progress on whatever the task is that you're trying to work on, then we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace and be okay with that. Just because your start might not look the way that you envisioned it, or you're not as far along as someone else is, that doesn't mean that you should completely give up and not get started at all. It might just mean that you have to step back and think about what is realistic for you and where you're at with things, and be realistic about what you can accomplish and how you might need to get started. Another way that comparison can keep us from getting started, I saw an article a while back that was talking about people in their pantries and how they were having this pantry envy, I guess. They were calling it some other things, but we'll just say pantry envy. And basically they were seeing these picturesque pantries and felt like they needed something that looked exactly like that. That's a beautiful standard, and yay if that's something that you can attain and that's something that you want to be able to do. However, if that idea of what it should look like is holding you back from even starting a pantry, because you don't feel like yours would ever look that good or would ever be to that same standard, that's not something that's helpful for the homestead. We want to be able to start putting some things back, start working on our pantry so that we have those items set aside for the future, whether that be for next winter or for a time when the weather gets bad, a time when maybe sickness hits the household and you can't get out. Whatever that might be, we need to be able to get started, even if it's not going to look like that picturesque idea that's out there. And so a lot of people were finding that even just in the area of getting started with their pantry, they were having a very hard time because of that comparison from where they were at to this beautiful standard that they felt like they would never achieve. Another thing that can happen is comparison can hold you back from following through on something that you've started. Again, when we're looking at what other people are doing and the progress that other people are making, sometimes it's really motivational because we can see something that inspires us to get going, something that inspires us to work towards whatever it is that they're doing. But we do have to be careful about whether or not the comparison is helpful or whether it is harmful. Sometimes things might be motivational, and other times, if the comparison is too strong, it can cause us to start something, and then when we're not making as much progress as someone else, it can cause us to just quit that project and not follow through. And this can really be a problem for us, particularly when the main goal is to make progress on the homestead and try to improve things and make things better. So we really just need to be cognizant of how things are affecting us and whether or not it's motivating us to aspire to do more, or whether it is demotivating and makes you want to quit what it is that you're working on because you feel like you can't keep up with the same level of progress as someone else. Comparison can also hold you back by allowing negative thoughts and comments to take hold. We've kind of alluded to some of the negative side of things, but if you're continually making comparison to others and you begin to notice this cycle of negative self-talk or negative thoughts and self-criticism, it can really hold you back from making the progress that you want to make. And again, I think we're all in a different place, but this is definitely something that has affected me in many different ways, both when it comes to homesteading things, but even in other areas of life too, where when the comparison is creeping in, it's hard to keep a positive outlook and maintain positive thoughts. And so this is something that we really just have to be aware of and be mindful of that inner conversation that's happening and how it might be affecting you. These are just 3 ways that I think comparison can hold us back from making progress on the homestead. You might be able to think of more, and if you can, please share down in the comments below. And if you have more to add to the discussion today, feel free to share that in the comments below as well. I think when it comes to making progress on the homestead or making progress in everything, it's important to really think about how different things are affecting us, how comparison is affecting us, how our thoughts are affecting us, and be mindful of what we can handle. So if you find certain things motivating, then great. Continue to use that motivation. But if taking in too much of something is causing that comparison to turn off into a negative way that's holding us back from getting things accomplished, it might be time to take a break from different social media or different areas where you feel like that comparison creeps up. If today's video was helpful, don't forget to click like. I'd love to have you subscribe and be part of our community here at Blooming Wildwood Homestead. And if you enjoyed today's video, you might also enjoy this one right here. Until next time, bye everyone.